Chief of the Defense Staff says Boko Haram insurgency has killed over 100,000 people in Nigeria. Mali threatens to defend against French sovereignty violations. Indonesia sets to demolish stadium where more than 130 soccer fans were killed. Now the news in detail. In Nigeria, Chief of Defense Staff CDS General Lucky Hirabo revealed that the attack by Boko Haram insurgency has led to the death of 100,000 persons, displaced over 2 million, and caused damages worth $9 billion. Hirabo made the disclosure during his presentation on the second day of the third ministerial performance review retreat held at the Presidential Villa, Abuja. He said the insurgency is now restricted to a corner of the territories the militants previously inhabited, even though they have made some inroads into the northwest. The CDS also said the armed forces of Nigeria received 2.5 trillion naira in 7 years as budgetary provision and have been able to tremendously increase internal security operations. He, however, regretted that the amount received was just 35% of the force's requirements and below 0.5% of the gross domestic product. Speaking on the force's operations in the Niger Delta, he said militancy has transmuted to crude oil theft, noting that gaps exist in the national security strategy, which he said could be overcome through initiatives of the political leaders, military operations, and the attitude of the population. Mali's Foreign Affairs Minister has announced that the military government would exercise its right to self-defense if France continued to undermine the West African country's sovereignty and national security. Speaking at a United Nations Security Council briefing on Mali in New York, Minister Abdoulaye Diop repeated allegations that France had violated its airspace and delivered arms to Islamist militants that have been waging an offensive in northern Mali for the past decade. France has denied the allegation that its relation with Mali have soared since an August 2020 coup and its withdrawing troops sent in 2013 to help fight the insurgency. Several reports, including the latest United Nations Secretary General assessment, accuse Malian soldiers and Russian mercenaries collaborating with the military government of abusing and killing civilians suspected of colluding with jihadists. Meanwhile, other European countries have ended their military involvement in Mali this year, often citing the junta's collaboration with Russia's fighters. United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres has chided India during a visit over its human rights record, which critics say has regressed under Hindu nationalist Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Since Modi came to power in 2014 in the Hindu majority nation of 1.4 billion, campaigners say persecution and hate speech have accelerated against religious minorities, especially for India's 200 million strong Muslim minority. Guterres explained that pressure has also grown towards government critics and journalists, particularly women reporters, with some having suffered relentless campaigns of online abuse, including death and rape threats. Guterres said in a speech in Mumbai that as an elected member of the Human Rights Council, India has a responsibility to shape global human rights and to protect and promote the rights of all individuals, including members of minority communities. He praised India's achievements 75 years after leaving British rule. This is the World Afternoon coming to you from Osun State Broadcasting Corporation, Ile-Awuye Okebale Osogbo, Voice of the West Nigeria. Now, I made this message. He who calls for equity must do so with clean hands. Check your conscience before taking action that affects others. Turkey's Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu says Turkey's police has detained 543 people in an operation across 59 provinces for their suspected links to a network accused by the government for orchestrating the failed 2016 coup. The minister revealed that the 8-month-long investigation aimed at deciphering the structure, recruitment process of new personnel and financial resources of the Gulen movement, which the Turkish government accuses of infiltrating into the state bureaucracy and attempting the coup. Soylu said so far, 543 out of 704 wanted by the prosecutors have been detained, adding that 17 of the detained were working in the public sector. According to him, the operation came after information showed that high-profile members abroad of the Gulen movement instructed members inside Turkey to prevent breakups from the organization, restructure the private units and financial activities, and continue activities in the country. Meanwhile, the country has requested the extradition of Gulen, but the U.S. is reluctant to extradite the self-exiled Islamic cleric, saying Ankara has not presented sufficient evidence against him. The Turkish government has been massively cracking down on suspects with links to the network since the failed coup. North Korea's military has warned South Korea to halt what it calls provocations in frontline areas, having again fired hundreds of artillery shots into maritime buffer zones near their border in response to field drills underway in the south. In its second statement directed at the south, the General Staff of the Korean People's Army (KPA) said the North troops opened threatening and warning fire again into the eastern and western waters in response to the firing by the enemies of over 10 shots from multiple rocket launchers near the border. The South's Joint Chiefs of Staff confirmed that North Korea fired around 100 additional artillery shells into waters off its west coast today, following its overnight launch of more than 250 artillery shots. The KPA official earlier said the North's move was aimed at countering a series of military provocative acts by enemies, citing the Hoguk military drills underway in the south. In the meantime, Indonesia said it will demolish a stadium where more than 130 soccer fans, including many children, were killed in a deadly stampede earlier this month, as it seeks to rebuild its reputation as a safe host nation ahead of the Under-20 Men's World Cup in 2023. The country's president, Joko Widodo, made the announcement following a meeting with the leader of soccer's global governing body, FIFA, in the Indonesia capital, Jakarta. The incident at Kanjuruhan Stadium in East Java was one of the world's deadliest stadium disasters and drained a spotlight on crowd control and safety standards in the Southeast Asian country ahead of the global competition. And here again are the highlights of the world at noon. In Nigeria, Chief of Defense Staff General Lucky Irabor revealed that the attack by Boko Haram insurgency has led to the death of 100,000 persons, displaced over 2 million, and caused damages worth $9 billion. Mali's Foreign Affairs Minister has announced that the military government would exercise its rights to self-defense in France if France continues to undermine the West African country's sovereignty and national security. Indonesia said it will demolish a stadium where more than 130 soccer fans, including many children, were killed in a deadly stampede earlier this month, as it seeks to rebuild its reputation as a safe host nation ahead of the Under-20 Men's World Cup in 2023. And that was the World at Noon, edited by Nathaniel Oyegoke. This news talk expressed dismay at the detection of 7.3 2 million multiple registrants by beavers in the recent survey of INEC electronics data and calls for prosecution of those involved in the electoral offense. The piece was written by Adeboye Popola.
A statement credited to the National Chairman Independent Electoral Commission recently by the media that 2.7 million registrants across electoral districts in the country were expunged from the Commission's electoral data on account of multiple registrations was struck like a thunderbolt. Mahmoud Yakubu, who was quoted as saying this at a public forum in London, noted that the registrants with double registrations were discovered by the new technology injected into the country's electoral system by Model Voters Accreditation System, BVAS. The registrants were those that registered in different states and constituencies for purpose of voting a candidate in various polling units to bamboozle other contestants to victory. The country had voted in no fewer than 6 national elections since the inception of the current political dispensation, with electoral registers fraught with multiple registrations. It could be concluded that the problem of good governance confronting the country is factored in manipulated electoral registers, which over the years have produced some unproductive political office holders. This is due to the fact that the narcissists are reputable in electoral frauds. The endemic corruption being manifested in wanton looting of public treasuries and gross mismanagement of public resources could be directly linked to awkward election that produced many occupiers of political seats at the executive level. It has long been fully established that some Nigerians engage in voting mercenary. This has been affirmed by arrest of indigenes of a state in another state queuing up to vote in a governorship election. Their arrest should not have been affected but for the tip-off received by the security agents. It is doubtful if the electoral offenders who were publicly paraded on local and international televisions were prosecuted for their offenses. The violation of electoral regulations inspired the national chairman of INEC to evolve the use of undercover agents in the polling units in the next election holding next year. The pertinent questions are: when will INEC start enforcing the laws against the political deviance in the country? How will INEC ensure justice for Nigerians on those involved in multiple registrations? Will INEC continue to allow electoral offenders go scot-free? Newstalk posits that the response of INEC to these questions are germane if all the reforms being introduced to the country's electoral system will bring positive outcomes. The age-long dictum is that a crime that is not punished will continue to multiply and will make laws prohibiting deviance remain impotent. Newstalk therefore calls on INEC to ensure the sanctity of electoral regulations by ensuring that whosoever that violates any part of it is punished.
That news talk by Adeboye Popola noticed with great dismay the evils of manipulated electoral registers on good governance since inceptions of democratic government in the country in 1999. It was presented by Temitope Olaiwola. For more about us, you can visit www.osbcng.org. Thanks for listening to the Word at Noon. Good afternoon.